The wind screamed across Willow Run Ranch like something wild let loose. It ripped through the valley, slamming shutters and rattling the old fence posts as if it wanted to tear the whole place from the earth. Claire Maddox braced herself at the kitchen door, pausing for just a moment, breathing in the heavy scent of rain and distant thunder. Her heart beat steady but hard, a rhythm she'd learned to trust through years of hard living on the land. She zipped her battered raincoat, yanked on her boots, and grabbed the flashlight from the hook beside the door. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the twisted, ancient branches of the willows that gave her ranch its name. For a second, everything was daylight. Then blackness swallowed the scene again, thunder chasing right on its heels. Claire pulled her hat low and stepped into the storm. She made her way past the old Dodge truck, its windshield already fogged, then cut across the muddy yard to the barn. Every step was a battle. The wind tugged at her. The rain stung her cheeks, and mud sucked at her boots. She gripped the flashlight tight and kept moving. Out here, in weather like this, hesitation was dangerous. Lives depended on her. Inside the barn, the scent changed. Hay, animals, sweat, and fear. The horses were restless, snorting and stamping in their stalls. Claire moved quickly, whispering their names, touching their flanks as she passed, letting them know she was there. But her focus was on the last stall, the one at the far end, where she'd kept her newest rescue, a wild Mustang mare, coal-black and proud, who'd only recently started to trust her. The mare's eyes flashed white in the beam of the flashlight. She was sweating, trembling, head swinging from side to side. Claire spoke softly, her voice low and steady. "It's okay, girl. I'm here," she murmured, letting the sound of her voice cut through the howl of the storm. But as she drew closer, she saw what she'd feared: blood glistening and unnatural on the straw. The mare groaned, legs buckling as another contraction racked her body. Claire knelt down, ignoring the mud and mess. The Mustang's breathing was ragged, her sides heaved, and with every flash of lightning, Claire could see the outline of life straining inside her. This was no ordinary foaling, and Claire knew it. Something was wrong. She felt it in her bones, the way she always had when trouble came to Willow Run. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking, and dialed the only person she trusted in times like these. "Hallie, it's me. Get here now," Claire said, her voice tight. "It's the mare. She's in trouble. Bring everything." On the other end, Dr. Hallie Nguyen didn't waste time with questions. "Be there in 10, she replied. "Hold on, Claire." The call dropped. Claire stuffed the phone back into her pocket, wiped her brow, and turned back to the mare. Another crash of thunder shook the barn, and a loose shutter somewhere banged wildly. The horses shrieked and stamped, but Claire's world had shrunk to the circle of light around her, the heaving mare, and the promise of new life fighting to be born. Minutes crawled by, each one longer than the last. The mare struggled, collapsing and rising again, hooves churning the straw. Claire spoke to her constantly, her words a lifeline in the chaos. All the while the storm raged, lightning flashing so close that the air smelled of ozone, and the thunder rattled the old barn beams. Suddenly, the mare collapsed with a violent shudder. For a heartbeat, Claire's breath caught. Then, with a great effort, the Mustang lifted her head and pushed one final time. A tiny, slick shape slid onto the straw. A foal, its coat dark and glistening, legs awkward and long. Claire let out a breath, her hands moving on instinct, clearing the foal's nostrils, rubbing its sides. "You're okay, little one," she whispered, relief flooding her voice, even as the storm howled on. But something was off. The mare didn't relax, didn't nuzzle her new foal as Claire expected. Instead, she tensed, nostrils flaring, eyes wild. A second contraction rolled through her, even stronger than before. Claire's heart jumped. "Oh no," she muttered. "Not twins. Not tonight." Hallie burst into the barn then, rain-soaked and out of breath, medical bag slung across her shoulder. She knelt beside Claire in the straw without a word, hands already moving, her calm presence steadying them both. The next minutes were chaos. Commands barked back and forth, gloved hands working in the half-light, the storm shaking the barn, the mare shrieking and struggling. It was a battle, and Claire fought with everything she had, her mind locked on the trembling life beneath her hands. Outside, the storm reached its peak, wind screaming, lightning striking so close the ground shook. Inside, time bent and twisted, measured only by heartbeats and the desperate hope that they might pull this miracle from the jaws of disaster. At last, with one final shattering cry, the second foal slipped free. For a long, terrifying moment, it didn't move. Then, almost impossibly, it lifted its head. Its coat was pale as moonlight, eyes wide and unafraid, and in the flickering shadows, it stood up on impossibly long legs, looking around as if it understood everything. Claire and Hallie stared, soaked and shaking, hearts pounding in the storm-dark barn. For a second, the world went silent. Just the wild, beautiful foal standing tall, a ghost in the lightning's glare. Then the storm roared back, and life at Willow Run changed forever. The world outside Willow Run was nothing but a roar of wind and sheets of rain, but inside the barn, everything centered around a circle of trembling light. And two foals. One dark as midnight, the other impossibly white. Hallie and Claire exchanged a look, wordless, both understanding the razor edge they still walked. The mare, her sides heaving, foam flecking her neck, stared at her new offspring with a wild, confused intensity. Claire kept a gentle hand on the Mustang's shoulder, speaking softly, but her mind raced. Two foals, both alive, for now. But the mother was exhausted, and there was so much that could still go wrong. Hallie knelt to examine the second foal. The filly, white as the storm's own lightning, legs long and unsure, stood shakily, snuffling the air. She blinked at Hallie, not with the dopey confusion of a newborn, but with something sharp and steady. Hallie felt a chill that wasn't just from the soaked clothes clinging to her skin. She glanced at Claire. "Did you see that?" Hallie said quietly. She stood up, on her own, that fast. Claire nodded, eyes never leaving the mare. "Yeah, I saw. I've never seen anything like it." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the barn in a stark white glare, then plunging them back into shadow. The dark colt, smaller, nuzzled at his mother's flank, desperate for warmth and milk. The mare seemed torn, her body still trembling, her eyes jumping between the two foals. Claire whispered to her, brushing sweat from the mare's face, willing her to calm down, to accept this impossible new family. Suddenly, the white filly took an unsteady step, then another, wobbling, but determined. She moved to Claire, nose bumping her hand, as if seeking comfort. Claire froze, looking down into eyes the color of pale silver. A shiver ran through her. "Easy now, little one," she murmured. "You're safe. We've got you." Hallie worked quickly, checking the mare's vitals, hands practiced but gentle. She looked up, voice taut. "She's lost a lot of blood, Claire. We need to keep her still, get fluids in her. And the foals, they're going to need help, especially the colt. Twins are rare enough, but surviving twins, especially with a wild, well, I've never seen it." Claire nodded, determination etched on her face. Do what you have to. I'll keep her calm. As Hallie prepped an IV, Claire stroked the mare's trembling neck, talking in low tones, telling her stories of sunny mornings and green pastures, of freedom and peace. The wind outside battered the barn, but inside, their circle of light was a bubble of fragile hope. The colt finally latched on, hungry and desperate. The mare flinched but didn't push him away. The filly watched, ears perked, then, suddenly, she trotted unsteadily around the stall, investigating every corner, as if the world itself couldn't wait to be explored. Hallie raised her eyebrows, shaking her head. That's not normal. She's barely 5 minutes old, Claire. Claire just watched, half amazed, half terrified. Lumina, she said softly, almost to herself. She looks like she's glowing. A flash of lightning made the white filly's coat shimmer, and for a heartbeat, Claire thought she saw faint, silvery dapples flickering along the filly's back. Then it was gone. The wind screamed louder, and the lights flickered as the power struggled to hold. Hallie moved fast, wrapping the IV tube in her jacket to keep it from snagging, and set to work monitoring the mare's breathing. The storm outside peaked, hammering the roof with such force that loose bits of shingle rattled down onto the rafters. The other horses in the barn grew frantic, hooves pounding, whinnies echoing. Claire stepped out to calm them, leaving Hallie with the new family. As she soothed a nervous chestnut, her mind spun. What if something went wrong now? What if the power died? What if the storm cut them off for good? Suddenly, a loud bang shook the barn. A tree had come down somewhere close. The foals startled, the mare whinnied sharply, and for a split second, chaos threatened to take over. Claire rushed back, just in time to see the white filly plant herself between her mother and the door, head high, eyes bright. The colt cowered, but the filly stared at the world as if daring it to come closer. Hallie met Claire's eyes. She's different. You can feel it, right? Claire nodded, heart pounding. I've seen a lot of foals born in storms, Hallie, but nothing like this. Gradually, the hours ticked by. The storm wore itself out, the wind losing its bite. Dawn began to seep through the cracks in the old barn, painting everything in a cold blue light. The mare, exhausted, finally relaxed her head against the straw, her breathing deep and slow. The colt nestled at her side. But the filly, Lumina, Claire thought again, stood over them both, legs trembling but proud, watching the sunrise as if she'd always been meant to stand between the darkness and the light. When the first rays hit her coat, she seemed to glow even brighter. Hallie stared in disbelief. I have to run some tests. This is something the textbooks never covered. Claire just smiled, brushing a hand over Lumina's neck. Whatever she is, she's ours, she said softly. And nothing, storm, science, or fate, is going to take her from us. Outside, the world was still battered, branches torn and fences down. But in the barn, with 2 new lives and the storm fading into memory, something miraculous had survived the night. As the gray dawn crept across Willow Run Ranch, the storm's violence faded to memory, leaving a ragged hush. The land looked battered and bruised, branches scattered across the fields, puddles filling every dip in the ground, the air fresh but heavy with that peculiar electric scent that lingers after lightning. For Claire Maddox, standing in the doorway of the barn, the silence felt sacred. A breath held between disaster and something like hope. Inside, the world was changed. The Mustang mare, stretched out and bone-weary, lay curled protectively around her 2 new foals. Claire and Hallie had spent hours tending to the family, moving with gentle hands and soft voices, afraid to disturb the fragile peace. The colt, smaller and darker, clung to his mother, drawing comfort and strength from her side. But the white filly, Lumina, seemed to belong to some other world entirely. Even as exhaustion threatened to swallow her, Lumina stood as much as she lay, never quite sleeping, always alert, her wide silver eyes following every sound, every shadow, every movement Claire made. Hallie Nguyen sat nearby, a mug of coffee clutched in her hands, her scrubs muddy and streaked with sweat. She kept glancing at the foals, jotting notes in her weather-beaten notebook, occasionally muttering observations to herself. Every so often, she would check the mare's pulse, measure her breathing, and study Lumina, baffled by her strength and calm. "You ever seen anything like this, Hallie?" Claire asked, voice soft as the light filtering through the broken barn window. Hallie shook her head. "Not in all my years. Twins are rare, but that filly, it's like she came out of the storm itself." Claire chuckled, rubbing her aching shoulders. "If she grows wings, I'm naming her Pegasus." The two women shared a tired laugh, but beneath it, both felt the same awe. Something was different in the barn, something in the air, a sense that they had witnessed a secret the world rarely showed. As the sun rose higher, the barn filled with golden light, chasing away the last chill of the night. The other horses, restless and edgy after the storm, began to settle. Claire moved through the stalls, checking each animal for injury, murmuring comfort, letting her hands reassure them as much as her words. She found a couple of minor cuts and a thrown shoe, but nothing serious. The Mustangs had survived far worse. But when she reached the mare and her foals, she paused, just watching. Lumina lifted her head, catching Claire's gaze, then wobbled across the straw and pressed her muzzle into Claire's palm. For a second, the rancher stood perfectly still, heart hammering. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, the filly leaned in, sighing softly. Hallie grinned. "Looks like you have a shadow." The mare, sensing her foal's absence, nickered low and warning. Claire quickly coaxed Lumina back to her mother's side, feeling the unspoken tension. The mare's protectiveness was sharper now, her wildness tempered by something fierce and maternal. When Lumina pressed against her, the mare's breathing eased, and she licked the filly's ears with slow, deliberate care. After hours of tending, Hallie finally packed up her supplies, promising to return later that afternoon to check on the family. She hugged Claire tightly at the barn door. "You did good, Claire, real good. This little miracle, it's going to change everything." Claire smiled, trying to believe it. When the last of Hallie's truck disappeared down the muddy lane, Claire wandered back inside. The filly, her filly, followed at her heels, pausing only when the mare called her back. The colt, shyer and weaker, rarely strayed from his mother's warmth. But Lumina seemed compelled by curiosity, trailing after Claire as she tidied the barn, changed water buckets, and swept the last of the storm's debris out into the sun. The day drifted by, gentle and slow. News of the wild storm and the miracle birth hadn't reached town yet, so the ranch was blessedly quiet. Claire cherished the peace, knowing it wouldn't last. Late that afternoon, as the shadows lengthened and the air grew sweet with the scent of wet earth, Claire returned to the barn with fresh hay. Lumina greeted her with a bright whicker, trotting to the stall door. The filly's movements were surer now, her coat gleaming in the slanting light, dapples shimmering like moonlight on water. The colt napped at his mother's side, every breath measured. Claire sat in the straw, legs stretched out, letting Lumina rest her head in her lap. She stroked the filly's neck, feeling the velvet warmth, the quiet pulse beneath the skin. "You're something else," she whispered. "I don't know what brought you here, but I'm glad you came." The words seemed to settle over them both. For the first time since the storm, Claire allowed herself to hope. Maybe after all the hardship, all the years of struggle and loneliness, this was her reward, a chance to witness the extraordinary in the heart of the ordinary. As dusk fell, Hallie texted to check in, asking for updates and reminding Claire to monitor the colt. Claire replied, then stood, dusting off her jeans, reluctant to leave the barn. But the chores never waited. That night, as stars blinked to life above the battered ranch, Claire sat on her porch, watching fireflies dance along the fence line. From the barn, she heard the low, contented nicker of the mare, the faint stomp of tiny hooves. She closed her eyes, feeling the peace ripple through her. In the storm's aftermath, Willow Run had changed. There was a new spirit in the air, a sense of gratitude, and something deeper, harder to name. The miracle in her barn had become a light in the darkness, a reminder that even the wildest storms could bring forth something beautiful and new. And as the night deepened, Lumina slept beside her mother, dreaming of sunlight, storms, and the gentle hands that had saved her. The following morning arrived cloaked in a soft golden haze, dew sparkling on the battered grass and broken limbs that still littered Willow Run. Claire was up before the sun, mug of black coffee in one hand, worry nesting behind her eyes. The night had been calm, the barn quiet except for the rhythmic sighs and soft nickers of the Mustang family. But something in her gut told her that calm never lasted long in her world. When Hallie's old pickup rumbled up the drive just after sunrise, Claire was already in the barn, checking the colt's breathing and brushing straw from Lumina's white coat. The filly pressed her face into Claire's shoulder, curious and trusting, while her brother nursed hungrily at their mother's side. Hallie entered with a tired smile, hair pulled back, medical bag slung across her shoulder. She knelt by the foals, professional and focused, but Claire could see the questions in her friend's eyes. "Let's run a few tests," Hallie said. "I want to be sure they're both healthy, especially after a night like that." She worked quickly, taking gentle blood samples from the foals. Lumina barely flinched, watching Hallie with those bright silver eyes, while the colt whined and kicked, but finally settled. Hallie checked heart rates, reflexes, vision, and finally slipped a tiny swab inside each foal's mouth, sealing the samples in labeled vials. When she reached for Lumina's ear tag, standard for new foals, Claire hesitated. "Do we have to?" she asked, voice low. Hallie paused, seeing the protective edge in Claire's gaze. "We'll keep it temporary," she said, "just for records, and I'll take it off as soon as we know she's safe." They finished the checkups, with Hallie making notes in her battered notebook, eyes flicking between the filly and the blood work. "Something's different," she murmured. "The colt's fine, but Lumina, her muscle tone, her reactions. She's off the charts for a newborn. And her coat. Look at that color." Lumina pranced in a shaft of sunlight, dapples glittering along her back, so pale they almost seemed to shift and move. The mare watched her foal with a mix of pride and anxiety, never letting her too far from reach. Claire busied herself with chores, but Hallie's words lingered. After Hallie left for the university lab with the samples, Claire wandered the barn, checking every latch, sweeping out mud, her thoughts racing. Could something really be wrong with Lumina? Or was this just nature's way of surprising them? That afternoon, the answer began to reveal itself in the strangest way. It started when Claire decided to fix the loose plank in the far stall, the one where the mare had foaled. She knelt to pry up the warped board and noticed something odd. The ground below was packed harder than it should have been, and beneath a thin layer of dirt, her hand brushed against cold metal. She frowned, digging gently with her fingers. It felt like a plate, maybe part of an old machine, but as she cleared away more dirt, she realized it was something else. The surface was smooth, almost polished, and faintly humming, just on the edge of hearing, like a deep, quiet vibration. Claire leaned closer, curiosity prickling her skin. Was this some buried electrical line? Had lightning struck here last night? Or was it something left behind from decades ago? She couldn't shake the strange feeling that the hum wasn't just mechanical, that it was somehow aware. She reached out to touch it, and instantly the metal glowed with a faint bluish light, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Claire jerked her hand back in surprise, heart hammering. She looked over her shoulder, suddenly nervous, but the barn was empty except for the horses and the soft sound of straw rustling. She tried again, and this time the glow grew stronger. Lumina, watching from her stall, pricked her ears and moved closer, drawn by the gentle shimmer. The filly leaned over the stall door, eyes fixed on the glowing metal. As she did, the hum rose in pitch, the light rippling out in delicate patterns, circles and lines, like water disturbed by a stone. Claire stared, mind racing. Was this why the mare had chosen this spot to give birth? Was Lumina somehow connected to whatever lay beneath the barn floor? She covered the metal plate, heart pounding, and glanced at the filly. Lumina whickered softly, then trotted to her, pressing her nose into Claire's palm. That evening, Hallie called from the lab. Her voice was excited, almost breathless. Claire, I ran Lumina's blood work. Her genes are Mustang, through and through, but there's something extra. A marker I've never seen. She's healthy, just unique. Claire didn't mention the discovery in the barn. Not yet. Instead, she stared at Lumina, who stood bathed in moonlight, eyes reflecting back the strange blue glow she'd seen in the earth. For the first time, Claire felt something close to fear. What had they brought into the world? Was this a miracle or a mystery that might change everything? All night, the barn was alive with questions, with the low hum of the unknown vibrating through the floorboards. Claire watched over Lumina, torn between wonder and worry, caught in the delicate space between the known and the unknowable. And as the wind whispered through the willows, she promised herself that she would protect this miracle, no matter what the truth turned out to be. A few days passed at Willow Run, and with each sunrise the storm felt further away. Yet Claire sensed the air on her ranch had shifted permanently, as if the land itself now held its breath, waiting for something to happen. The Mustang mare, her foals, and especially Lumina, became the center of Claire's days, every moment filled with small wonders and growing anxiety. Lumina thrived. She ran circles around her brother, her strength almost supernatural for a newborn. The mare, protective yet more at ease than before, let Claire and Hallie handle the foals with barely a flick of her ear. But word travels fast in a small town, and miracles never stay secret for long. It started innocently enough. Hallie stopped by the feed store to pick up extra vitamins for the foals and mentioned, with pride and a little awe, the extraordinary birth. The clerk, Ruth, was a notorious gossip. By nightfall, half the county knew that something strange had happened at Willow Run. The details grew with every retelling. Some said the foals glowed in the dark. Others claimed Claire had called down the storm herself, and more than one person insisted the white filly could already outrun a truck. The story spread, and soon the phone at Claire's ranch rang with curious voices, neighbors, distant relatives, even a local reporter from the county newspaper. Claire tried to keep things quiet. She told the truth, but only just enough. Yes, the foals were healthy. Yes, the birth was dramatic. but horses surprise you sometimes. She didn't mention the strange, glowing metal plate under the barn. She didn't say a word about the odd hum or how it seemed to grow stronger whenever Lumina was near. On the third morning after the storm, Claire was mucking out stalls when a battered Subaru pulled into her drive, spitting gravel. A tall, thin woman with sharp eyes and a digital recorder stepped out, introducing herself as Zoe Carter from the Willow Creek Herald. She asked polite, rehearsed questions, notebook open, pen poised, eyes constantly darting toward the barn. "Is it true your Mustang had twins during the storm, Miss Maddox?" Zoe asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Lucky as I've ever been," Claire answered, trying to keep her voice neutral. "And I hear there's something unusual about the white foal. Something people are calling a miracle?" Claire hesitated, sensing the trap in every word. "Just a healthy filly with a lot of spirit," she said. "Nature does strange things, that's all." Zoe scribbled, frowning. "May I see them?" "I'm not showing off the babies," Claire said, gentle but firm. "The mare's still nervous, and I won't put them in danger for a story." Zoe pressed, but Claire stood her ground, finally walking her back to the car. As the Subaru rattled away, Claire let out a long, slow breath. She didn't see Lumina peeking from behind the barn, watching everything with luminous eyes. But keeping secrets in a small town is like trying to hold back a river. By afternoon, a few neighbors stopped by, some bringing casseroles and homemade bread, others arriving empty-handed with little more than a friendly excuse to peek in the barn. Claire let them look from a distance, never letting more than one or two people in at a time. Most were delighted, especially the children, who pressed their faces to the stall door and whispered to each other about the magic horse. But a few adults looked wary, shooting Claire glances full of suspicion or quiet envy. That night, as thunder rumbled far in the distance, Claire tried to sleep but found herself listening for the soft hum beneath the barn floor. She dreamed of blue lights and the sense of being watched. In her dream, Lumina stood in a circle of shimmering silver, her coat pulsing like a living moonbeam. Morning came too soon, and with it another problem. As Claire led the foals out for their first stretch in the paddock, a sudden whirring sound filled the air, the strange low vibration she'd first heard the night of the birth. Lumina froze, ears pricked forward, then trotted fearlessly toward the old barn. The metallic plate hidden under the floor pulsed with blue light, just visible beneath the edge of the wood. Claire's heart thudded as she watched. When Lumina drew near, the lights danced in intricate patterns, lines and spirals and symbols that made no sense at all. The foal touched her nose to the spot, and the hum grew louder, almost musical. As if on cue, a car pulled up, two young men with camera gear and press passes drawn by the rumors. Claire gritted her teeth. "Please stay back," she called, blocking the barn door. "The foals aren't on display." One of them ignored her, pointing his camera at Lumina just as the foal lifted her head, blue light flickering in her mane. The men gasped, stumbling backward. The light faded as quickly as it appeared, and Lumina trotted back to her mother, unaffected. "Did you see that?" one of them whispered. "That wasn't normal." Claire's patience snapped. She herded them off the property, threatening to call the sheriff. Once the men were gone, Claire slumped against the fence, rubbing her eyes. She realized she was shaking, not from fear, but from anger and something deeper, a fierce need to protect Lumina at any cost. That evening, Hallie returned. Claire told her about the visitors and the lights, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and dread. Hallie listened, silent and thoughtful. "We need to be careful," Hallie said finally. "People want to believe in miracles, but they fear what they don't understand. If word gets out about the lights, about Lumina, the whole world could come knocking." Claire nodded, resolve hardening inside her. "Let them talk," she said. "This ranch is Lumina's home, and I won't let anyone, take that from her." As darkness fell, the hum beneath the barn seemed to pulse in time with Claire's heartbeat. Outside, the wind carried voices and rumors, but inside, Willow Run stood strong, a sanctuary in a world suddenly hungry for answers, and perhaps for something miraculous. By the end of the week, the air around Willow Run crackled with more than just rumors. A line had been drawn, though nobody could say exactly where. Some people saw a miracle, something to be treasured and protected. Others, nervous and suspicious, saw danger in anything they couldn't explain. Claire found herself caught in the crossfire, her phone constantly buzzing with calls she didn't want to answer. She tried to go about her business, pretending things were normal. Every morning she mucked out stalls and brushed the mare. Every afternoon she checked the fences and brought fresh water. But the sense of being watched, of living under a lens, grew heavier. It seemed that no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't keep Willow Run out of the spotlight. On Saturday, it all came to a head. Claire was fixing the east pasture gate when a convoy of vehicles rolled up the drive. The first was the sheriff's car, blue lights flashing low and lazy. Behind it came a pair of black SUVs marked with the county university's seal, and finally, a battered minivan packed with townsfolk. Some she recognized, some she didn't. She felt her jaw clench, but she wiped her hands and strode down to meet them, her boots kicking up dust. Sheriff Dale, tall and broad, climbed out first. He offered a nod, half apology, half warning. "Morning, Claire. Got a bit of a crowd today." Claire forced a polite smile. "Looks that way." Out of the SUV stepped a trio of scientists, led by Dr. Lionel Graves, a sharp-featured man with the careful clinical gaze of someone used to getting answers. He introduced himself, then gestured to his assistants. One carried a briefcase, the other a laptop and a camera. "Miss Maddox, we've come at the request of the community and the university," Dr. Graves said. "We understand there's something extraordinary on your property. For everyone's safety, and for the sake of science, we'd like to take a look." Before Claire could answer, a voice rose from the minivan. A woman named Patty Bell, who ran the church charity. She pressed her palms together. "Claire, honey, people are scared. That foal of yours, some say she's an angel, some say the devil sent her. You can't blame folks for wanting to know what's really going on." More voices joined in, a dozen people all talking at once. Some pleaded for a chance to see the foals, some muttered about unnatural things, while a few quietly asked Claire to ignore the others, to stay strong. Claire felt heat rising in her chest. This was her home. These were her animals. But she could see that the tide was turning, and that the fence around her ranch might not hold back the world much longer. Hallie arrived, parking her pickup on the shoulder and pushing her way through the crowd. She put a hand on Claire's shoulder, her presence grounding, reassuring. Claire turned to face the sheriff and Dr. Graves. "I appreciate your concern, but this is still my property. The foals are healthy and the mare is safe. There's no law against raising horses, no matter how special they are." Sheriff Dale sighed. "Claire, we're just trying to keep the peace. Let the scientists take a look. Show everyone you've got nothing to hide." Dr. Graves tried a different approach. "Think of the good we could do, Miss Maddox. If this foal really is unique, if there's something in her biology, studying her could help us all. You'd be part of something bigger than this ranch." The crowd murmured approval. Claire glanced at Hallie, who met her eyes and gave the slightest shake of her head. Hallie's loyalty was absolute, but even she could see that Claire was cornered. Reluctantly, Claire opened the barn doors. The crowd surged forward, but she stopped them with a raised hand. Only Dr. Graves, his team, Sheriff Dale, and Hallie came inside. The others waited, pressed against the doors, peering through the cracks. The Mustang mare tensed immediately, her ears back, body shielding her foals. Lumina stood tall, not hiding, but watching every move. Her silver eyes seemed to see through each stranger, reading their intentions. The scientists unpacked their equipment. Cameras flashed, laptops pinged, recorders buzzed. Dr. Graves moved slowly, voice low and soothing, but the tension in the barn was electric. He ran a handheld scanner near Lumina. The machine beeped wildly as he approached her, then fizzled out completely, the screen going blank. "That's odd," one of the assistants said, frowning. "Must be interference." Dr. Graves tried again, but the same thing happened. He scribbled notes, eyes narrowing in frustration. Lumina, unfazed, stepped forward and nuzzled Claire's hand, as if seeking comfort. Hallie spoke up, her voice clear. "You're upsetting them, Lionel. If you want data, you'll get better results by observing, not poking and prodding." Sheriff Dale nodded in agreement. Maybe it's time to back off, let the animals rest. But the scientists weren't done. One assistant, a young woman with nervous hands, stepped too close, reaching out to touch Lumina. In an instant, the filly sidestepped and stamped her hoof. The metallic plate beneath the floor gave a sharp, resonant hum, and a flicker of blue light danced through the cracks. The mare whinnied, the colt shrank back, and even the adults jumped. The scientists stared, open-mouthed. Dr. Graves demanded to know what was under the floor. Claire's patience snapped. "That's none of your business. This is my barn. You're done here." Back outside, the mood shifted. Word of the blue light had spread. Some saw it as proof of a miracle. Others muttered about witchcraft or alien nonsense. Arguments broke out, dividing friends and neighbors. Some swore they'd seen the light too. Others warned Claire not to let outsiders take the foals. Claire stood in the yard, her back to the barn, her friends and enemies alike arrayed before her. Hallie leaned in. "We'll get through this," she whispered. "But you need to decide. Will you let them turn Lumina into an experiment, or will you fight to keep her safe?" Claire looked around at the faces, hopeful, afraid, greedy, curious. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders. "This ranch is a sanctuary," she said, voice steady and sure. "Lumina stays here. If you want answers, you'll have to accept that some things can't be explained." "Not yet." The crowd drifted away, divided, some vowing to stand by her, others whispering threats or warnings. The sun set over Willow Run, casting long shadows across a ranch at war with itself. Inside the barn, the Mustang family huddled close, while the strange hum beneath the floor pulsed quietly, as if biding its time. And Claire, standing watch as darkness fell, knew that the true battle was just beginning. The uneasy truce at Willow Run lasted only a few days. News of the miracle Mustang had spread far beyond their small county. Journalists called Claire's phone every morning, and strangers camped at the end of her drive, hoping for a glimpse of Lumina. But what most people didn't see, what even Hallie hadn't fully grasped, was that something inside the barn was quietly, astonishingly changing. It began with the little things. One afternoon, while Claire cleaned the tack room, she heard an odd click from the main aisle. She peered through the dust motes and saw Lumina at the paddock gate, fiddling with the heavy latch. The filly paused, glanced over her shoulder, then pressed the latch sideways with her nose and tugged it upward with her teeth. The gate swung open. Lumina trotted out, straight for Claire, her hooves soft on the earth. Claire froze. Horses were clever, but this was something else, an understanding of levers and locks that no foal should have. She guided Lumina back inside, latching the gate more tightly. But the next morning, the filly had done it again, this time using her hoof to nudge a fallen bucket into place and stand on it, giving her the extra height needed for the trick. Hallie laughed when Claire told her. "Maybe she's just a genius," Hallie joked, scribbling notes. But Claire saw the uncertainty behind the smile. Days later, the surprises kept coming. Hallie arrived with a veterinary student to check the foals. Lumina seemed to listen as they spoke, cocking her head and responding to certain words. Out. Back. Stay. The colt, shy and gentle, kept close to his mother, but Lumina was everywhere, exploring the barn, nudging tools, even pulling open the feed room door when she smelled sweet oats inside. More than once, Claire found her arranging objects, stacking buckets, pushing rags into neat piles, or scratching patterns in the dust with her hoof. But it was a stormy morning, 1 week to the day after Lumina's birth, when the filly's abilities could no longer be explained away as mere cleverness. The sky was dark with thunderclouds, the same kind that had brought Lumina into the world. The barn was tense, the other horses uneasy as the wind picked up. Claire worked quietly, aware of the electricity in the air. Hallie arrived just before noon, her arms full of paperwork and a new puzzle, a set of wooden blocks, each painted with a letter of the alphabet. She set the blocks in a shallow tray on the straw, just outside Lumina's stall. "Watch this," she told Claire, her eyes glinting with excitement. Lumina stepped forward, ears pricked. Hallie pointed to a block marked with a bright red C. "Can you touch this one?" she asked, voice gentle. Lumina studied the tray, then tapped the C with her hoof. Hallie grinned and slid another block forward. L. Again, Lumina touched the right block. They went through the alphabet. Sometimes Hallie pointed, sometimes she said the letter out loud. Lumina got it right almost every time, missing only once, and then only pausing to correct herself, as if thinking things through. By the end, she was pushing the blocks around on her own, spelling out rough, crooked patterns in the straw. Claire shook her head, half laughing, half unnerved. "That's not just intelligence," she whispered. "That's understanding." They tried numbers next. Lumina responded to 1, 2, and 3 by tapping her hoof the right number of times. Hallie's hands trembled as she jotted notes. This is impossible," she murmured. But for Claire, the wonder was tinged with fear. The blue light from beneath the barn had grown stronger at night, casting gentle ripples across the floorboards whenever Lumina walked near. The hum sometimes became a melody, so faint she thought she might be imagining it. When the wind howled, Lumina stood watch at the window, her silver eyes searching the darkness, as if waiting for something or someone to return. That evening, more reporters arrived, joined by 2 professors from the university, who demanded another look at the foals. The debate was fierce. Half the crowd called Lumina a marvel, a scientific breakthrough. The rest whispered that she was a sign of something dangerous, a freak that should be studied or feared. Hallie argued with the professors, urging compassion and patience. Claire just held her ground, keeping everyone at a distance, her resolve hardening with every accusation. Late that night, after the crowds had gone and Hallie was locking her truck, Claire lingered in the barn with Lumina. The filly leaned against her, warm and solid, her breath steady. "What are you, little one?" Claire whispered. "Miracle or mystery? Or both?" Lumina nuzzled her hand, then began to scratch at the straw. With slow, deliberate strokes, she traced out a shape. First a circle, then a smaller circle inside it, and a line connecting the two. Claire stared, realization dawning. It was the same pattern that glowed in blue light on the metal plate beneath the barn floor. She called Hallie, who watched, speechless, as Lumina repeated the symbol, then nudged the block with the letter C onto the drawing. Claire sat down hard on the straw, overcome by a rush of fear and awe. Lumina was not just a miracle of nature. She was connected, somehow in ways they couldn't explain, to whatever ancient secret pulsed beneath their feet. The next day, the debate in the town flared anew. Was Lumina a gift or a warning? Had she come to teach or to test them? For every person who saw a blessing, another saw a threat. The sheriff warned Claire that some folks were calling for authorities to seize the foal for public safety. But in the quiet of the barn, Hallie and Claire watched Lumina closely. They realized her abilities were real, but they were not unnatural. They were born of care, of freedom, of something wild and wonderful that could not be replicated or controlled. As the storm clouds gathered again in the distance, Claire whispered a promise to Lumina, to herself, and to the land she loved. She would fight for this miracle, no matter what the world decided to call her. And as night fell, the silver filly pressed close to Claire, her presence both comfort and challenge, a living reminder that some wonders could never be explained, only protected. By the end of the week, the small town of Willow Creek was split in two. It wasn't just neighbors who came knocking now. Word of Lumina's intelligence had brought scientists from out of state, reporters from national networks, even a senator's aide who left his business card on Claire's porch, promising helpful government resources. Every day brought a new intrusion, a drone buzzing over the paddock, a white van idling at the end of the road, letters with bold university letterheads or urgent requests from government offices. The sheriff called twice a day, keeping Claire updated and warning her to expect an official visit from state authorities. Inside the barn, the mood grew more tense with each sunrise. The Mustang mare paced protectively around her foals, her wildness rising with the stress. The colt grew stronger, but it was Lumina who drew every eye, every camera, every rumor. The filly seemed to understand she was at the center of a storm, never showing fear but becoming more watchful, standing close to Claire whenever strangers approached. One morning, just after dawn, Claire awoke to the sound of tires crunching on gravel and voices arguing outside. She looked out the window to see a crowd at her gate. 2 university officials in sharp suits, a state veterinarian with a briefcase, a sheriff's deputy, and a handful of locals, including Patty Bell and a few others who'd grown hostile, muttering about unnatural creatures and threats to public safety. There was also Hallie, standing at the gate with her arms crossed, a warning clear in her posture. Claire pulled on her boots and strode out to meet them. The lead official, Dr. Mason, spoke first. "Miss Maddox, under state law we have the right to examine and, if necessary, impound any animal that poses a public risk or scientific value. We're here for the filly." "You're not taking her," Claire replied, her voice like steel. "She's not some lab rat. She's family." The deputy stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're asking you to cooperate. If you refuse, we have the authority to—" "No," Hallie cut in. "You have the authority to request. Claire has done nothing wrong. That filly is healthy. You can observe, but you're not taking her away from her mother or this ranch." Patty Bell raised her voice. "What if she's dangerous? What if there's something wrong with her? You heard what happened last night. Those lights again. That strange hum. How long before something bad happens?" The crowd murmured, divided. Some people urged caution. Others shouted support for Claire. The tension was a living thing, crackling between them. Lumina watched from inside the barn, her silver eyes calm but alert, the blue light pulsing beneath the floorboards in gentle, rhythmic waves. The officials pressed, producing paperwork and trying to reason with Claire. They promised the best care, world-class labs, even offers of money for the unique specimen. But for Claire, the line had already been drawn. She moved to the barn door, blocking their way. She could feel Hallie standing behind her, the weight of the community, divided but watching, heavy on her shoulders. "Listen to me," Claire said, her voice trembling with emotion but strong. "This filly isn't just a miracle. She's a living being, a child to her mother, a part of this land. She's done nothing wrong. She doesn't deserve to be taken, poked, or studied like some kind of monster." One of the university officials tried to push past, and the mare let out a shrill, protective whinny, placing herself between Lumina and the strangers. Lumina pressed close to her mother, and for a moment, all eyes were on the foal, her small, trembling body, her fierce determination not to leave her family. At that moment, something in the air changed. The neighbors who'd come to watch, some out of suspicion, others out of hope, started to murmur. A young boy, his face smudged with dirt, called out, "Leave her alone! She's just a horse!" Others nodded, voices growing louder, supporting Claire's plea. Even a few who doubted now wavered, seeing the filly's distress and the mare's desperate protection. The tide in the crowd began to turn. Hallie stepped forward. "This isn't just about science," she said, her voice clear. "It's about compassion. You can't separate a newborn from her mother. You can't break up a family for curiosity's sake." A silence fell, thick and heavy. The state vet lowered her clipboard, suddenly uncertain. The sheriff glanced at the faces in the crowd and seemed to weigh the risk of pushing further. Then, from the edge of the group, a woman Claire didn't know stepped forward. She looked tired, her voice quiet. "I lost my son last year," she said. "I know what it's like to lose family. Don't take her baby, please." It was the final straw. The crowd, sensing the moment, erupted in support. "Let them be. Leave the foal. They're just horses." The officials tried to argue, but the sheriff stepped between Claire and the authorities, arms folded. "That's enough," he said. "I won't let you cause a riot here." The officials retreated, frustrated and embarrassed. The deputy offered Claire a nod, and the sheriff quietly assured her he'd buy her some time. But she needed to be careful. As the crowd dispersed, many offered hugs, apologies, or silent support. The fear and anger hadn't vanished, but something had shifted. A public stand had been taken, and compassion had won the day. That night, Claire sat in the barn beside the mare and her foals. Lumina lay with her head on Claire's knee, breathing slow and deep. Hallie brought tea, and the two women watched the barn settle into peace. "You did it," Hallie whispered. "You stood up for her. For all of them." Claire smiled, tears in her eyes. "I couldn't have done anything else." Outside, the night was quiet, but for the rustle of willow leaves. The blue light beneath the barn glowed gently, as if breathing in relief. For now, Lumina was safe, because a community had remembered for a moment what mattered more than fear or curiosity. And as Claire drifted into sleep, she held on to hope that maybe, just maybe, the world could learn from Willow Run, that kindness and empathy could be chosen, even when the unknown came knocking. Morning brought a hush to Willow Run, a soft silver mist rolling over the pastures as the first light crept across the battered fences and scattered willows. After the long weeks of chaos, for the first time in ages, the air felt almost peaceful. Claire Maddox lingered at her window, mug of coffee warming her hands. heart heavy and grateful all at once. The events of the day before still echoed in her mind. The faces of neighbors, the passionate pleas, the tense standoff, and that final fragile moment when compassion had prevailed. She made her way out to the barn in the pale dawn. The Mustang mare greeted her with a low nicker, weary but calm. The colt nudged Claire's palm, hungry for breakfast, and Lumina pressed her silvery head into Claire's chest, her breath warm and trusting, her eyes alive with a strange, quiet wisdom. Claire knelt in the straw, burying her face in the filly's neck, letting tears fall for the first time since the storm. All around them, life resumed its gentle rhythm. Chores waited, hay to be pitched, water buckets to be scrubbed, the fences to be checked for damage after last night's wind. But something in Claire had shifted. Where once she had seen only hardship and survival, now she saw a kind of grace, an invitation to listen, to watch, to protect instead of control. Hallie arrived soon after, boots muddy, hair wild, notebook in hand. She found Claire in the paddock, staring at the rising sun. "You look lighter," Hallie said softly. "Maybe I am," Claire replied, a real smile spreading for the first time in weeks. "Or maybe I'm just tired." They shared a laugh, then stood together, quietly watching as Lumina led her brother in gentle circles around their mother. The colt was growing stronger every day, his legs steadier, his spirit bolder. But it was Lumina who set the pace, her movements graceful and assured, the dapples on her white coat shimmering in the early light. "I keep thinking about everything that's happened," Hallie mused. "How quickly things changed, how people reacted, to something beautiful, but also to something they couldn't explain." Claire nodded. Fear and wonder, side by side. "That's what this whole place feels like now." They walked the fence line, talking softly. Hallie shared that she'd met with 2 local scientists, Dr. Graves among them, who had come back, not to demand, but to ask. This time, they weren't interested in taking samples or controlling the story. They wanted to observe, to learn, and most importantly, to do so with respect. Hallie, ever the bridge between worlds, invited them to join her at the ranch, under Claire's terms, no taking, no prying, just watching and learning. To Claire's surprise, she found herself open to the idea. In the end, it wasn't knowledge that was the enemy. It was the need to dominate, to possess, to turn miracles into curiosities or weapons. Knowledge could be shared, if it was rooted in humility and care. That afternoon, the little group gathered by the barn. The scientists set up a quiet station outside, far from the stalls, recording observations but never crossing boundaries. Local school children came by with sketchbooks, drawing Lumina and the colt as they played in the sun. Elders from town stopped to watch, sometimes whispering prayers or simply standing in silence. The story of Willow Run had changed. It was no longer just about a strange foal or a mysterious light, but about the power of listening, to each other, to the land, to the animals who shared their world. As days passed, the ranch transformed. The old barn, once a place of labor and shelter, became a gathering space for sharing stories, learning, and healing. People who had argued and pointed fingers now sat together in the straw, talking softly, remembering what it meant to be part of something larger than themselves. Claire saw it in the way children reached out gentle hands, in the way grown men put aside old grudges to repair fences, in the way Hallie laughed with her rivals and welcomed new voices into the fold. One afternoon, a girl from the elementary school stayed late, helping Claire sweep the barn. She asked if the magic horse would ever leave, if the lights would come back, if more miracles might happen. Claire smiled and knelt beside her. "Sometimes, miracles aren't just about what happens," she said. "Sometimes, They're about how we respond, whether we choose fear or kindness, whether we protect what's fragile, even when we don't understand it. The girl nodded, eyes wide, and hugged Lumina, who stood perfectly still, as if understanding every word. In the evenings, Claire found herself reflecting by the fence, watching the sunset paint gold across the valley. She realized that Willow Run had always been a place of trial, floods, droughts, lonely winters. But now it was something more, a place of possibility, a place where people could learn to care for the unknown, to share wonder, to change old patterns. Even Hallie, once all science and certainty, seemed transformed. She led quiet workshops for the town, teaching about animal behavior, about the balance between observation and respect. She told the story of Lumina and the storm, but always with the lesson at the heart of it, that true miracles asked more of us than curiosity. They asked us to listen, to cherish, to protect, not to control. On the edge of sleep one night, Claire heard Lumina's gentle nicker from the barn, the hum of the mysterious plate beneath the floor now just a soft background song, like a heartbeat or a distant promise. The fear that had haunted her was fading, replaced by a quiet gratitude. The world had not taken Lumina away. Instead, it had given Claire a new purpose: to teach, to share, and to safeguard the fragile thread that connected all living things. Willow Run became a beacon in the valley. People came not just for the story, but for the peace they found there. And Claire, once so determined to stand alone, found herself surrounded by a family larger than she'd ever imagined, brought together by the lesson of a storm, a Mustang, and the courage to choose compassion. As another dawn broke, Claire whispered a promise to the land, to Lumina, to herself. She would always listen, always protect, always honor the miracles she'd been given, even and especially the ones she could never explain. The seasons turned, as they always did, and Willow Run changed with them. Summer slipped into a golden autumn, and then into a crisp, starlit winter. But for the first time in memory, the changes brought excitement rather than anxiety. Word of Lumina and the miraculous night at Willow Run had spread far and wide. Yet instead of curiosity seekers or hostile officials, it was families, students, and even weary travelers who came now, drawn by the story, yes, but more by the hope and peace the ranch seemed to radiate. Claire Maddox found her life quietly transformed. No day was without its work. There were still fences to mend, stalls to muck, hay to stack. But there was a new lightness to it all, as if every chore carried meaning. The Mustang mare, now fully recovered and stronger than ever, ran with her foals across the wide pasture at dawn. The colt, once fragile, had grown bold and sure-footed, chasing after his mother and sister with boundless energy, and Lumina, always Lumina, remained at the heart of it, her pale coat shining in the sun, her presence both calming and electric. Lumina had become a symbol, not just for Willow Run, but for people across the county and beyond. Her story was told in classrooms, written up in nature journals, and whispered in the pews of local churches. People came not to gawk, but to learn, to volunteer for ranch work, to listen to Claire's stories, to sit quietly at the edge of the pasture and watch the Mustangs move like liquid muscle beneath the sky. One mild afternoon, as a group of children from the city knelt in the grass, sketching Lumina and her family, Claire sat with Hallie by the barn. They watched the scene, their faces relaxed, laughter on the breeze. "It still surprises me," Hallie said softly, "how much changed because of one storm, one foal, and one choice to protect instead of control." Claire smiled, her gaze never leaving the fields. I used to think this land was all about survival, just getting through the next trial. But it's more than that. It's about what we make of the miracles we're given, and whether we choose to meet them with fear or with care. The blue light beneath the barn had faded, a soft glow only seen on the stillest nights. Sometimes Lumina would stand over the spot, as if remembering, but there was no longer any sense of unease. Just a gentle hum, like the world itself was singing quietly to those who listened. Visitors often asked Claire what made Lumina so special. She would kneel down, look the child or adult in the eye and say, "Miracles aren't always about what's impossible. Sometimes they're about what's right in front of us, if we have the courage to see and the kindness to protect." She'd seen it too. People leaving the ranch changed. Children became more gentle, running their hands along the horses' flanks with awe instead of roughness. Teenagers volunteered for chores without complaint, curious to learn how to mend a gate or calm a frightened animal. Grown men and women, some carrying years of bitterness or loss, would linger in the barn and find themselves drawn into quiet conversations about hope, forgiveness, and what it meant to care for something beyond themselves. The scientists who had once argued for control now worked side by side with Hallie, observing but never interfering, sharing their findings with respect. The school teachers who once worried about strange influences now organized field trips to Willow Run, using Lumina's story as a lesson in compassion, cooperation, and humility. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold, Claire hosted a gathering in the old barn. Friends and strangers alike sat in a circle of hay bales, the scent of sweet grass and warm horses filling the air. There was music, laughter, and storytelling, each person sharing what Willow Run had come to mean to them. Some spoke of second chances, others of unexpected friendships, others still of the way the ranch had helped them remember the beauty in small things. When her turn came, Claire rose, her hands calloused but steady. She looked at the faces gathered, some familiar, some new, all part of this unlikely family. She said, "When the storm came that night, I thought we'd lose everything. I was scared, and I wanted answers, wanted to know why it happened, how to fix it, how to keep it from happening again. But that night taught me something I'll never forget. That the greatest miracles aren't always the ones we understand, but the ones we choose to protect and cherish together. It's not about controlling the unknown, but honoring it. Not about having all the answers, but about choosing kindness again and again, even when it's hard." The crowd was silent for a moment, the lesson sinking deep. Then someone began to clap, and soon the barn filled with applause and grateful voices, the sense of community stronger than ever before. In the days that followed, life at Willow Run found a new balance. Claire still faced challenges, sick animals, broken fences, bills to pay, but she met them with fresh perspective. The ranch had become a sanctuary not just for Mustangs, but for all who needed a place to feel hope. Lumina, once a curiosity, was now a gentle leader among the horses, her presence a living reminder that there was still magic in the world, waiting to be discovered and honored. Claire began to write letters to other ranchers, encouraging them to trust in the resilience of the land and to care for their animals with patience and humility. She joined Hallie in speaking at schools and town meetings, always ending with the same call to action: honor the natural world, protect what is fragile, never lose sight of kindness, even in the face of uncertainty. And so the story of Willow Run and the miracle of Lumina became more than just a local legend. It became a beacon, a quiet call to listen to the land, to one another, and to the wild, bright possibilities that storms sometimes bring. As another storm gathered far on the horizon, Claire stood at the fence with Lumina by her side, watching the sky change colors. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more mysteries she could never hope to solve. But she also knew, deep in her bones, that she would face them with an open heart, and with the knowledge that the truest miracles were those she chose to protect every single day. And she hoped, she truly hoped, that everyone who heard her story, whether in a barn, a classroom, or through whispered words on the wind, would carry that lesson forward. In a world full of storms, let us be the ones who choose compassion, wonder, and courage, no matter what the future may bring.